Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today we are going over our previews and predictions for what should be an absolutely stacked Week 8 of the 2024 college football season. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy it. And just as a reminder, we have our $100 giveaway going for the season. Be sure to follow us on our social medias for a chance to win. The links to those will be down in the description. And without further ado, let's jump into some games to watch this week. Starting with the games tonight, second-ranked Oregon travels to Purdue to take on the Boilermakers. We wouldn't be talking about this matchup in a normal circumstance, but this is the letdown spot of a lifetime. Oregon's coming off the biggest win of any team this season, and now they have to travel to play a Purdue team that just took a pretty solid Illinois team to the wire last week on short rest nonetheless. And we are confident in Dan Lanning, but a loss here would not be the most inexplicable thing we've seen this year. Next, let's look at Oklahoma State at 13th ranked BYU. State is looking to bounce back in this game, and a win over BYU would be their best shot at getting back on track for a potential Big 12 championship appearance. But unfortunately for them, their defense is just bad this year, and BYU has been more than capable of exploiting defenses both through the air and on the ground, mainly through quarterback Jake Retzlaff, who has been having a great season this year. And for the games on Saturday, let's start with Missouri at Auburn. There are a number of matchups like this one this week, which is why this week is lining up to be another good one. And Auburn hasn't looked bad on paper. They've just not been particularly efficient, and they've been very loose with the football. But given a good day where the luck is in their favor, they are very capable of beating a team like Missouri, who has wildly underperformed this year comparatively to how we saw them coming into the season. They don't look awful, but we thought of them as a potential playoff team, and they've looked more so like a fringe top 40, top 50 team, which leaves a lot up to chance in this game. Next, we have Arizona State at Cincinnati. This was already going to be a great matchup, but unfortunately, Sam Leavitt is out at quarterback for the Sun Devils, and in his place steps Jeff Sims. Yes, that Jeff Sims, which adds an extra layer of intrigue to this matchup. Cincinnati will now have a much more dynamic offense in this matchup, and we feel confident saying Sims will turn the ball over at least once in this game. So we are giving Cincinnati the edge in this one. Next, we have Louisiana at Coastal Carolina. This is a big matchup between two contenders in the Sun Belt, but the best chance the Chanticleers have in this one is forcing it into a shootout. That Coastal Carolina defense has been beyond bad, so we think this one will go in favor of the Ragin' Cajuns. They've been one of the most efficient teams in the Sun Belt this season, and it should be an interesting battle between them, Louisiana Monroe, ironically enough, and Texas State for the Sun Belt West title this year. Next, let's look at South Carolina at Oklahoma. These are the kinds of matchups that we live and die for. Two teams who have had up and down years so far, one of which nearly beat Alabama on the road last week. For the Gamecocks, the key to this one will be the play from the defense. Oklahoma's offense has struggled to really find an identity this far, and if you can limit possessions and generate turnovers in this matchup, that'll take a ton of pressure off Lenora Sellers, who hasn't looked bad at all in low-stakes situations this year. For Oklahoma, it'll be much of the same though, and you're gonna have to find a way to get the ball down the field with Michael Hawkins, something we're not super confident in seeing at a high rate in this matchup. Next, let's look at Colorado at Arizona. These are going to be two teams in similar circumstances right now. Both of these teams have solid offenses, Colorado more so than Arizona probably, but both have struggled to find a sustainable identity on defense. Colorado has looked like the much better team on paper, at least through their first 6 games this year, so we will give them the edge here, but don't be surprised if this game goes into the high 60s or even 70s in total points scored. Next, let's look at another group of 5 matchup in the Sun Belt. James Madison at Georgia Southern. This is going to be yet another very crucial game in the Sun Belt, this time against the current top 2 teams in the Eastern Division. James Madison has been the far more efficient team so far this year in this matchup, but give it to Southern. They've been able to grind out 2 solid Sun Belt wins already. Their defense is just what worries us in this one. They look mediocre to bad virtually everywhere on that side of the ball, which is why we favor the Dukes in this matchup. Now let's take a look at Texas A&M at Mississippi State. Another classic letdown spot. A&M is coming off a bye week and they play LSU at home next week. But next they face a Mississippi team that just made a solid game out of what should have been a splattering against Georgia. They should be coming into this one with a lot of confidence, but we trust Mike Elko. It looks like he has the Aggies on a new level this year, and we expect Connor Wigman and running back Le'Veon Moss to have great performances and a lopsided victory for the Aggies. Now let's take a look at our last game to watch in Kentucky at Florida. These are going to be two teams in desperation mode. Both of these teams need wins here to keep their postseason dreams alive. And for Florida, it's not looking promising as Graham Mertz is done for the year. But DJ Lagway has shown he can be a spark plug in that offense. He'll just need to be a good bit more reliable and efficient with his arm if he wants to take down a Kentucky defense that has been able to keep up with every team they played so far this season. And if their offense can match the level of play that that defense has in this one, this team will win by double digits very easily. And for your group of 5 highlight matchup of the week, it's North Texas at Memphis. This should be an American Athletic Conference defining matchup this season. These are two teams that are still heavily in the mix to make the title game and maybe even compete for a playoff bid. But let's slow down a bit and talk about North Texas. They've been another shootout style team. A lot of offense, not a lot of defense being played for the Mean Green, but that could lend to their favor because Memphis hasn't been a team that's built to play in those kinds of matchups. They've averaged about 14 less points per game than North Texas, but the defense is the biggest factor here. Memphis has been very stout on that side, very efficient, been able to generate turnovers at a very respectable rate. So we will give the edge to the Tigers here, but it will still be interesting to see exactly how this matchup plays out. And moving on to our big impact matchups, let's start off with Nebraska at 16th ranked Indiana. Who would have thought this game would be one that everybody was talking about in the Big Ten? It's the red hot Hoosiers facing the Cornhuskers at home. And we've heard the arguments on both sides. Indiana hasn't really played anybody. Nebraska has played bad the past couple weeks. But all that matters in this game is that both teams are coming off bye weeks. Both teams are going to get each other's best. And it'll be interesting to see that high-powered Indiana offense take on that near-elite Nebraska defense. The unstoppable force meets the immovable object. Somebody's got to win, and we're very interested to see who that will be. Next, let's talk about 6th ranked Miami traveling to Kentucky to take on the Louisville Cardinals. And we know Miami is amazing. Cam Ward should still easily be in your top 3 for the Heisman race, but Louisville is no pushover. Of the last 3 teams Miami has faced, we think Louisville is probably the best of that bunch. Unfortunately for them, their strongest area defensively has not been stopping the pass. Teams have still been relatively efficient through the air against them this year, but the offense with Tyler Shuck and Isaac Brown should be able to keep up with the Hurricanes, and they will be playing in Louisville, which should make this game a lot more interesting. Next, let's look at 7th ranked Alabama traveling to Neyland Stadium to take on the 11th ranked Tennessee Volunteers. This one was a heavy contender for the game of the week this week, but just barely missed the cut, and rightfully so. Both of these teams are in very interesting positions coming into this game. Both are coming off back-to-back bad performances. And we want to know which of these teams, if either, is truly primed for a bounce back game in this one. For the Volunteers, Nico is going to need some kind of confidence boost. He has all the talent in the world, but it's felt like he's shrunk in the biggest moments the past couple of weeks. So if he can find his groove and start looking like pre-week 5 Nico, they should stand a much better shot in this game. And for Alabama, we are much more confident in them all around. They just need to play more complete football for all 4 quarters, which they haven't shown they can do in conference play so far. Next, let's look at 24th ranked Michigan taking on 22nd ranked Illinois. And we need to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. We don't want to sound rude, but the fact that Michigan is ranked is pretty silly. I'm not sure what the AP voters think changed in their bye week to warrant that upgrade. But either way, this matchup should be one of the better ones in the Big Ten this week, and Illinois has quietly been one of the best teams in the conference to start this year, but they had it rough last week against a pretty awful Purdue team. They started off hot, but let their foot off the gas and gave up 23 points in the 4th quarter, which will hopefully be a great learning experience for them. Luke Altmaier, though, has been fantastic. They have a great quarterback at the helm, unlike their opponents in this one. Michigan will have to rely on their defense to keep them in this game, which is especially difficult when you can't throw a forward pass. They'll need to rely on Kalel Mullings, Donovan Edwards, and special packages with Alex Orji against an Illinois team who hasn't looked great against the run, all things considered. Next, let's look at 12th ranked Notre Dame at Georgia Tech. This game is most likely going to be won or lost on the ground. If Georgia Tech can efficiently mitigate the Notre Dame run offense, there is no reason they can't win this game, but that is a pretty big if. Both of these teams have been very efficient on the ground, but the edge here has to go to Notre Dame. They've had the much better defense between the two teams, but there is still absolutely a path for Georgia Tech in this game. And last in our big impact matchups, let's look at 8th ranked LSU at Arkansas. Arkansas has been the boogeyman in the SEC so far this season, and we're here for it. They've been one of the most exciting teams to watch in that conference this season, and they're facing one of their biggest rivals at home in LSU. And this is one of the best matchups this week for so many reasons. Like we said, it is a rivalry, but these teams also match up very well against each other. LSU has lived by the arm of Garrett Nussmeier almost to a fault this year. And the Razorbacks have enjoyed solid play from Taylon Green this season, but they've been a run-heavy team for the most part. And they've averaged nearly 500 yards of total offense on average this season. This one has barn burner written all over it. We cannot wait to watch this one. And moving on to your capital G game of the week. It is the 5th ranked Georgia Bulldogs traveling to Austin to take on the 1st ranked Texas Longhorns. You'll see the stats on your screen, but the Bulldogs have been an interesting case study this season. It's been a surprisingly volatile year for them. A lot of off-the-field controversy, which we won't get into, but could play a role in the team's lack of focus. But they sit at 5-1 heading into a huge game versus the #1 ranked team in the country, the Texas Longhorns, who flatlined Oklahoma last week. On paper, the edge has to go to Texas, but we're one Carson Beck masterclass away from a Georgia win here. He's looked phenomenal at times this season and average at other times, but we know he's capable of locking in for this one, and he's going to be your player to watch for the Bulldogs alongside Quinn Ewers for the Longhorns. Those two will be absolutely pivotal in this matchup. They will probably be the driving forces for both of these teams, and they're both going to have a mighty task at hand. Next, let's take a look at our upset watch with our good friend Todd. Everybody say hi to Todd. Thank you. First, let's look at Oregon at Purdue, who is a 27.5-point underdog. Oregon did struggle a bit to start the year, but they seem much more focused. They're in a good rhythm halfway through the season, and my humanness wants to believe Purdue has a route to victory in this one. There is a lot of funny circumstances here. Friday game, coming off a huge win at home, now travels on the road to take on a Purdue team who they haven't really seen that often. But this is Todd's segment, and he couldn't be more in favor of the Ducks. He'll be giving this one a 1 out of 10. Todd likes the Ducks to win and cover in this one. Next, let's look at Missouri versus Auburn, who is a 4.5-point dog. Let's completely flip the script in this one. This is entirely possible. It'll take Missouri playing a complete game for us to believe they'll take this one easily, which they have not shown they have the ability to do, which is the driving force for Todd's upset alert meter going haywire in this one. He has this one at a 9 out of 10. Missouri is in the danger zone this week. And last, let's look at Navy versus Charlotte, who is a 16.5-point underdog. Navy has looked very dominant at that level so far this year, but Charlotte has rattled off 2 pretty solid wins over ECU and Rice, and they're coming off a bye into this game. And Todd is going to err on the side of America and say this one is a 3 out of 10. Pretty unlikely, but Charlotte's got an okay shot in this game. And for your final segment, it is the big impact predictions. Here are all the matchups this week, starting with Nebraska at Indiana, and this one really could go either way. There are completely realistic worlds where either team wins. For Nebraska, it'll be because their defense is easily the best Indiana has had to play so far. And for Indiana, it could be because they're an actual contender in the Big Ten with a legitimately great offense and a solid defense. but we like Indiana just a little bit more in a few key areas here, especially on special teams. Indiana wants to be aggressive, and I'm not sure Nebraska has the means to win these kinds of matchups just yet. Give us the Hoosiers in this one, 31-28. Next, it is Miami at Louisville. Miami Magic may be a real thing, but they're going to need to be a lot more careful against a very solid Louisville team who is more than capable of putting up points in this game, especially since this one will be played in Kentucky. But we feel something special brewing in Miami this year. They've got a lot of luck on their side, we'll just say. So give us the Hurricanes in another tight battle, 38-28. And now let's look at Alabama at Tennessee. We like Tennessee a lot this year if Nico can get it together and if the defense can play to an elite level, which they have the talent to do. This game's going to be at home also. It's going to be rocking, and it'll be the toughest environment Alabama has faced so far this season. But we are more confident in the Crimson Tide overall than we are the Volunteers this season. So we like Alabama in this one, 30-24. And now let's look at Michigan at Illinois. This has classic Big Ten matchup written all over it. If Michigan can put together a couple drives, they can absolutely win this one. But they've not shown they are capable of doing even that this year. And they'll have to go on the road to Illinois, who's going to have the X Factor player in this matchup in Luke Altmaier. And we believe the Fighting Illini are going to pull this one out 20-16. Next, let's look at Notre Dame at Georgia Tech. And we like this matchup a lot. Georgia Tech has been a really important team this year. And if the ACC was as chaotic as it was last year, we could see them as a legitimate candidate to win the ACC this season, which they still are in all honesty. But that conference is a lot more top heavy, just to go on a bit of a yellow jacket spiel there. But Notre Dame is absolutely the better team in this matchup. That defense is elite. Give us the Irish in this one, 28-21, but don't sleep on those yellow jackets. And for our final big impact matchup, it's LSU at Arkansas. We like this matchup a lot, and the big factor in this one for us, as it has been in every Arkansas game we've picked this year, is that Razorback defense. They've been much improved this year to go alongside a pretty solid offense. And we actually like Arkansas a lot more all around than LSU this year. LSU has had a pretty solid pass game, a pretty okay run game the past couple weeks, and a defense that is sustainable. But this is going to be a very difficult environment to play in this year, and they've shown that road environments are especially very tough for them this season. So give us Arkansas in an upset in this one, 35-31. And for your ONO Sports game of the week, it's Georgia at Texas. We liked Georgia a lot coming into this season, and we still like them going forward. There's just a lot of recalibration that needs to be done on that team. They need to make a few more adjustments and focus in a little bit tighter on what matters if they want to see the SEC title and the playoffs this year, which we think they can do. But Texas looks like the best team in the country, as confirmed by their #1 ranking. And we just like where Texas is at more right now. The offense is better, the defense looks better, the special teams is better, and Georgia is more than capable of having a huge breakout game where Beck throws 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. But we trust the Longhorns ultimately to play the better 4 quarters in this one. We think they will win with a final score of 35-28 to solidify your Texas Longhorns as the best team in football. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Be sure to tune in later this week for the recap of this week. As always, if you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.